In today's video, we're diving into the most brutal shark attacks ever recorded, from the Spearfisher's final mistake in California to the jet ski collision that turned a paradise into a feeding frenzy. But first, let's travel to Australia, where Jensen went surfing and became a shark's lunch. It was March 18, 2017, just after sunrise along the coast near Byron Bay, Australia. The water was warm, almost too still for that hour. From shore, it might have seemed perfect for beginners. Soft breaks, faint wind, and almost no one else around. But under the surface, visibility was no more than 2 feet. Jensen, 24, had flown in from Christchurch with 3 college friends on a cheap getaway. She worked as a marketing assistant for a travel agency. Surfing had become her outlet, something she learned from YouTube tutorials and short weekend lessons. She was eager to prove she could handle herself in unfamiliar water, but she was still inexperienced. She'd convinced the group to try a sunrise surf before the crowd came, saying it would be peaceful and cinematic, something worth remembering. Her friends, 2 guys and another woman from her university days, weren't much better on the water. None checked the conditions or the fact that beaches along the stretch of coast were known for early morning shark activity near the point. They rented boards from a kiosk that didn't ask questions, and one had borrowed a small jet ski from a friend at a nearby beach, saying it's for extra fun. Kara was the most focused of the group, staying farther out to catch the cleanest breaks, while the others shouted and posed for phone videos closer to shore. Beyond them, the Pacific shifted color, from gray-blue to something darker. The bronze whaler shark, known locally as the copper shark, preferred these inshore waters, especially when schools of mullet and trevally gathered. Adults often reached 9 feet long and weighed over 400 pounds. They were powerful, but not indiscriminate, usually attacking only when startled or mistaking prey during low visibility. Kara's friends, already in their swimsuits, ignored the faint red sign left half buried in sand from the day before. They paddled out laughing, one of them dragging the GoPro to film the fog. Kara was farthest out, positioned over a deeper channel, an area older surfers tended to avoid when light was poor. Minutes later, one of her friends spotted a faint dorsal fin break the surface near Kara's board. They shouted her name, but weren't sure what they were seeing through the mist. Kara, looking over her shoulder, thought it was a dolphin. There were often pods nearby, and a sleek fin wasn't unusual. But then the water beneath her board surged sideways, a powerful lateral movement that struck the board from the side and displaced her weight. The shark hit from the flank rather than directly below, knocking the board hard enough to throw her backward into the water. The board flipped, leash tangling around her ankle. Her friends froze. The man on the jet ski fumbled with the throttle, shouting for the others to paddle in. Kara surfaced once, screaming. The shark's first bite tore through her left thigh. She tried to grab the board, but the leash held her under. The shark turned again, likely drawn by movement, and struck her midsection. The friends panicked. One of them started the jet ski and immediately charged to shore, leaving the rest. The other 2 followed, paddling frantically towards land, yelling for help, though no lifeguards were on duty yet. Witnesses from the parking area later said they saw the group screaming as they reached the shallows, abandoning their boards. Out beyond the break, Kara was still visible for a few seconds, then disappeared into the fog. When authorities finally launched a rescue ski about 4 minutes later, guided by the screams from shore, the blood trail had already widened across 50 yards. The first thing he saw was the floating board, its leash severed. Kara was found face down, about 30 feet away, motionless. She had suffered a severe traumatic amputation of the lower left leg, and deep punctures marred her torso and shoulder. The shark had likely released her after the second strike, a typical pattern when large prey stopped struggling. Her pulse was gone before the lifeguard reached the shore. Forensics later confirmed a bronze whaler, estimated at around 8 feet, responsible for the attack. The bite radius matched that species, narrower than a great white, more crushing than slicing. The shark's teeth had left clean, overlapping arcs across her ribs and back. The rescue team wrapped her in towels and placed her in a lifeboat, but she was pronounced dead on the sand minutes later. Police interviews described her friends as hysterical, soaked, and incoherent. One admitted he argued about whether to help or flee when he saw the fin. Another said the sound of Kara's scream froze them in place. Other people called them cowardly, though investigators acknowledged the shark was still circling when they fled. The Byron Bay Council temporarily banned dawn surfing for a week and quietly increased patrols. Kara's body was flown home to New Zealand 3 days later. Her parents requested no photos be released. For a few days, local papers debated whether her friends could have done more. As the waters of Byron Bay turned crimson in California, a spearfisher would discover that the scent of fresh blood in the water is an open invitation for bull sharks. It was July 19, 2016, a windless morning off La Ventana in Baja, California Sur. A small boat rocked slowly in the calm water. Two men inside preparing their dive gear. Little did they know, predators followed blood farther than expected. Jeremias Ruiz, 31, had lived his whole life near the water. He worked at a dive shop in La Paz, repairing compressors, guiding tourists, and occasionally leading spearfishing trips for locals. He was confident underwater, but lately he had been pushing for bigger catches. The tourist season was slow that month, and he wanted footage for a promotional video to draw more customers to their charter business. His friend Gonzalo Torres had agreed to film him from the boat and join him for the deeper dive. They'd spearfished together for years and trusted each other's rhythm, one descending while the other stayed near the surface to watch for danger. They left the shore before sunrise in Gonzalo's fishing boat, stopping near a reef shelf 2 miles from land. The water there dropped sharply from 20 feet to nearly 80, and schools of jack and amberjack sometimes gathered along the edge. Jeremias had chosen the spot for that reason. He wanted a single, strong fish for the camera, something that showed skill without the use of chum. Beneath them, the reef formed a narrow ridge covered in coral heads and sand patches. Visibility was around 25 to 30 feet. Bull sharks in particular were known for their unpredictable aggression and tolerance for shallow water. They could exceed 8 feet and weigh over 300 pounds, with a bite force among the strongest of any shark their size. Most encounters ended harmlessly, but locals knew they reacted quickly to wounded prey. Jeremias surfaced with a heavy jack on his spear. The shaft bent slightly from impact. The fish thrashed near the surface, scattering blood into the current. Jeremias tried to hold it steady to avoid spillage, but the wound was deep and the bleeding constant. Gonzalo suggested moving to another spot, but Jeremias wanted one more dive for a cleaner shot and better footage. As he reloaded, neither of them saw the shadow that had begun circling 30 feet below. He descended again to about 45 feet, moving toward a coral head where another jack had darted earlier. From above, Gonzalo tracked his air bubbles and watched the line drift lazily behind him. Then, from the corner of his vision, he noticed a shape moving fast. A gray mass rising from the deep, head down, tail beating hard. It was too quick for a warning shout. The shark hit from below and to the side, jaws locking onto Jeremias's left thigh. The impact folded him backward, the water clouding instantly red. His spear gun drifted out of reach as the shark twisted, shaking him once before letting go. Gonzalo saw him kick upward, clutching his leg, but the blood was pouring out in thick streams. The bull shark circled once, then came back. Gonzalo dove from the surface, striking the animal with the butt of his spear gun as it passed. The shark's snout hit Jeremias's hip, ramming him again before veering away. Gonzalo wrapped an arm around his friend's chest and kicked upward. Jeremias was still conscious, gasping through the snorkel. They broke the surface beside the boat, and Gonzalo hauled him partly over the side, the torn leg trailing in the water. The wound was massive. Deep gashes through muscle and bone, skin peeled back by the torque of the bite. The water inside the boat turned red as he tried to tighten a belt above the wound, but the bleeding never slowed. For nearly 15 minutes, Gonzalo steered toward shore with one hand, pressing on the wound with the other. Jeremias drifted in and out of awareness, his breathing shallow. According to Gonzalo, half a mile from the beach, Jeremias stopped breathing entirely. He tried chest compressions, but there was no pulse. When they reached land, locals from nearby huts helped carry the body to a truck that took him to the small clinic in La Ventana. The doctor who received him confirmed he was already deceased from massive blood loss and tissue destruction, consistent with a single bite from a large shark, likely a bull given the arc of the teeth impressions and crushing damage to the femur. His body was later transferred to La Paz for autopsy, where findings matched Gonzalo's account exactly. Authorities noted that his spear gun line and camera showed no defensive strikes fired, suggesting the shark's first hit was sudden and decisive. Fishermen in the area reported a large shark following bait schools near the reef that same week. Some blamed the growing number of spearfishers for conditioning the animals to associate noise and blood with food. Others said it was simply bad luck. There was no hunt for the shark. Local divers agreed to suspend trips in that area for several months. His dive shop in La Paz closed for 2 weeks. A modest service was held near the marina where they had launched that morning. Even as the waters of California claimed another spearfisher, in La Jolla Cove, a lifeguard trainee would learn that sea lion colonies are where juvenile great whites practice their most deadly skill, the investigative bite that leaves no room for second chances. It was September 12th, 2013, a quiet evening at La Jolla Cove in Southern California. A group of lifeguard trainees stood on the beach, their shadows stretching across the sand as the sun dipped behind the cliffs. It was supposed to be a routine conditioning swim, a test of endurance and composure. Ethan Caldwell, 22, had joined the San Diego lifeguard training program earlier that summer. He was fit, competitive, and eager to prove himself after being passed over the previous year. A former collegiate swimmer from Riverside, he was known for his discipline and steady form, not for risk-taking. He'd volunteered for extra drills, wanting to show his instructors he could handle open water conditions without hesitation. The cove was familiar to him. He'd snorkeled there with friends countless times, but that night's challenge was different. A solo 1,200-yard swim across the mouth of the cove at dusk, while a partner shadowed from a kayak. The decision to run the swim that late came from a mix of scheduling and pride. The instructors had shortened the day's exercises after equipment issues, and Ethan insisted on finishing his planned distance anyway. His assigned safety partner, Jason Rios, offered to follow alongside in the kayak. The last light was already fading over the cliffs, and most swimmers had cleared the water. Ethan stripped down to his red trunks, rubbed sand off his hands, and waded in. The sea around La Jolla that month had been especially active. Sea lions had gathered in large numbers along the rocky southern edge. Their presence often attracted predators from deeper water, including juvenile great whites that followed the food chain north from Baja. Juveniles between 6 and 8 feet were not uncommon along the coast, often feeding on small seals and fish. They tended to hunt in low light, ambushing from below in quick, investigative bites. Most encounters ended without fatalities, but when they mistook a human silhouette for prey, the damage could be catastrophic. Ethan started strong, keeping his rhythm steady as he reached the midpoint of the cove. From shore, the remaining trainees watched the faint ripple of his strokes under the dim light. Jason followed about 30 yards behind, the kayak slicing through the surface in short glides. Around that time, several sea lions were seen leaping near the outer rocks, erratic movements that usually meant a predator was nearby. A local diver had even mentioned, earlier that week, spotting a young white shark feeding on a carcass just offshore. The instructors knew, but the information hadn't filtered down to the trainees. To most, Dusk swimming near the rookery seemed routine. At around 7:28 p.m., Jason saw Ethan pause mid-stroke. The swimmer lifted his head, scanning the surface as if disoriented. A moment later, he began to kick forward again, but then his body jolted sharply, and the water erupted around him. The splash was violent, too sudden to process. Jason paddled hard toward the disturbance, hearing a short, choked sound and seeing Ethan's arm break the surface once before disappearing completely. By the time he reached the spot, the only signs were bubbles, churned foam, and a faint slick spreading outward. He circled frantically, calling to the shore crew for backup. The entire event had taken less than 10 seconds. From what marine investigators later determined, the shark had struck from below and slightly behind, targeting the movement of Ethan's kicking legs. The bite caught him high on the left thigh, severing the femoral artery and crushing the bone. Based on the bite radius, the shark was estimated at 7 feet, likely a juvenile white, acting out of instinct rather than aggression. The sudden shock and loss of blood would have rendered Ethan unconscious within moments. The shark released him immediately after the strike, a common pattern when realizing the prey wasn't its usual target. Jason stayed at the site until the safety team arrived by jet ski minutes later. They dragged a weighted line through the water, finding fragments of the torn swim fin and one goggle strap. The slick spread farther toward the kelp line as the current shifted north. Rescue boats searched through the night using lights and sonar, but visibility was poor. At sunrise, a Coast Guard helicopter spotted the body drifting less than half a mile from the cove, face down, missing the left leg below the hip but otherwise intact. The recovery team brought him ashore at the lifeguard station. The autopsy confirmed exsanguination from a single catastrophic bite. There were no defensive wounds or additional lacerations, supporting the theory of an investigative strike rather than a prolonged attack. The tissue margins showed crushing force consistent with a great white's conical teeth. His training belt and gear were preserved as evidence, though no further shark was tracked in the area. Local authorities closed the cove temporarily, issuing warnings about dusk swimming in proximity to sea lion colonies. The San Diego Lifeguard Department suspended open water drills for several weeks, reviewing safety protocols for solo conditioning swims. Jensen, though uninjured, was treated for shock and placed on leave. Yet even as Ethan's body was recovered from La Jolla Cove in Florida Keys, a dive instructor would be separated from her group by strong currents and carried her into the open ocean, where a predator treats anything adrift as potential prey. It was May 27, 2018, a still morning off the Florida Keys. Charter boats drifted lazily over the reef line. Visibility was perfect, currents mild, and nothing in the water seemed remotely threatening. Rachel Donner checked her students' gauges one last time before descending into the blue. Rachel, 34, had been teaching scuba full-time for nearly a decade, splitting her weeks between guiding tourists through coral gardens and training rescue divers near Miami. She prided herself on being predictable underwater. That weekend, she was contracted by a charter company out of Islamorada to lead a group of 6 advanced divers on a drift dive at Alligator Reef. The current-based dive meant they'd drift with the flow while the surface boat followed their buoys from above, picking them up when they surfaced. Rachel had done hundreds of similar dives. Her motivation for taking that extra shift was simple. She wanted to save for a new dive computer and a trip to Belize later that summer. The group had been reliable, a mix of hobbyists and a pair of experienced locals. The plan was straightforward: descend along the mooring line, stay together, deploy a surface marker buoy, and let the current carry them east across the reef. By 10 a.m., they were hovering 60 feet below the surface, finning calmly through clear blue water. Rachel checked her depth, motioned her divers to adjust spacing, and scanned the coral for barracuda and nurse sharks. Nothing seemed out of place. Oceanic white-tip sharks are known for their boldness and slow, circling curiosity toward floating objects. They can grow up to 10 feet long and could appear suddenly far from shore, drawn by scent or flashes of reflected light. They are opportunistic, slow to spook, and known to approach divers at the surface, particularly when a diver was alone and drifting. Just after 10:40 a.m., Rachel and her group began ascending from their safety stop. The current had strengthened since descent, sweeping them apart faster than expected. One diver lost sight of the group's buoy line and surfaced early, prompting a brief commotion as others tried to follow. Rachel surfaced last, deploying her own bright orange buoy to mark her position. The charter's deckhand spotted it immediately, about 100 yards off the bow. But within minutes, a sudden eddy pulled her marker farther east, out of alignment with the group. Her radio remained clipped to her, but she didn't signal distress. Standard drift deviations happened often. By the time the chase boat turned toward her, she had drifted beyond the reef edge into deep, open water over the continental shelf, where the bottom fell away and the color of the sea shifted to a darker blue. Witnesses said her marker still bobbed clearly in the water, though she appeared smaller with each passing minute. The main dive boat was still collecting the others. Rachel likely realized she'd drifted farther than planned, but with plenty of air and a calm surface, she probably expected recovery soon. The GoPro clipped to her vest had been running intermittently since ascent, capturing short clips of her drift and surroundings. The footage recovered later showed her glancing around, adjusting her buoy line, and checking her watch. At approximately 11:05 a.m., her camera footage became erratic. The frame showed the surface from below, filtered through pale green light. Then a sudden shift as she turned toward a movement. A pale, rounded fin entered from the corner, white-tipped, wide, moving deliberately. Oceanic white-tips were known to circle swimmers before approaching. The shark passed once, its dorsal fin glinting as it brushed near the buoy line. Rachel kicked lightly to turn, holding the camera steady. Then it lunged upward from below, striking her side with enough force to twist her around. The camera tumbled, briefly capturing bubbles, flailing arms, and a cloud of silt before cutting out. Investigators reconstructed the attack from the camera footage and the wounds. The shark had first bitten into her right arm and shoulder, pulling her sideways. The force shattered her wrist and tore through the wetsuit. She likely tried to push it away. The defensive lacerations on her forearms matched that motion. When the shark circled again, she was bleeding heavily, attracting renewed interest. Witness divers from the main boat, now closing in, saw distant splashes and a red plume spreading rapidly. The second strike was lower, a deep bite to the torso that tore into her ribs and abdomen. Oceanic whitetips, fed by tearing, shaking their heads side to side. The motion left wide, serrated wounds. Blood spread across the surface, staining her buoy line dark red. She would have remained conscious for less than a minute before hypovolemic shock set in. By the time the chase boat reached her marker, her fins were floating nearby, one strap broken and the other drifting loose. Her body was recovered 20 minutes later, missing sections of tissue from both arms and one side of the torso. The coroner confirmed she had been alive during the first 2 strikes. The cause of death was exsanguination, compounded by drowning. Her silver dive computer was still attached to her left wrist, its reflective casing scratched and dented. Officials later determined that several long-line fishing vessels had been operating 30 miles offshore that week, discarding bycatch that drew oceanic whitetips closer to the coast. The dive company temporarily suspended operations in the area. Rachel's funeral was held in Miami with about 50 attendees, mostly dive professionals and regular students. In diving forums, the discussion was brief, an acknowledgement that even the most careful instructors could be undone by isolation and timing. As Rachel was pulled from the drift current off the Florida Keys in Oahu, 2 jet ski riders would collide and spill fish bait, creating the perfect storm of blood and scent. A dinner bell that calls Hawaii's most notorious predator. It was June 17, 2014, a clear, windless morning off Oahu's south shore. The surface of Kihei Lagoon was almost mirror still. It was the kind of day made for fast rides and easy decisions, the kind that gave no warning of what would come late. Lena Cabral, 29, was a dental hygienist from Kapolei who had recently taken up jet skiing as a weekend hobby. She liked acceleration, the feeling of cutting through open water after hours in a clinic. She had taken safety courses, followed rules when watched, and dismissed them when the bay seemed empty. That morning, she joined her coworker and friend, Ryan Duanmu, 33, a warehouse logistics technician who spent his free time spearfishing. Ryan had brought along a small bait bucket left over from a fishing trip earlier in the week, intending to use the scraps later to lure small reef fish closer for underwater photos while they rested near the buoys. The old bait was thawed and oily, something he admitted he didn't want to waste. They launched from the Kihei Marine Center shortly after 9 a.m., riding side by side toward the buoys that marked the outer boundary of the lagoon. The water was warm, visibility high, and the reef below visible in streaks of pale green. Both machines were mid-range Yamaha VX models, capable of speeds above 50 miles per hour. Lena rode slightly behind Ryan, keeping distance as they made wide turns near the markers. Kihei Lagoon sits near deep channels that feed into the Pacific, where large predators occasionally enter during feeding hours. The tiger shark is the most common of Hawaii's large coastal sharks, growing up to 14 feet and known for opportunistic feeding. They're drawn to scent trails of blood, fish remains, and even fuel slicks that mimic decaying tissue. Though unprovoked attacks are rare, several incidents had occurred that decade, nearly all linked to discarded bait or fish cleaning near shore. Around 9:40 a.m., the 2 riders began accelerating toward the outer buoy line, trading positions in playful sprints. Ryan's bait bucket trailed several yards behind, bumping along the surface and spilling bits of decomposing fish flesh into the wake. A couple fishing from a skiff about 200 yards away noticed the slick forming and shouted warnings, gesturing for them to cut it loose. They didn't hear. Moments later, Ryan veered right to loop back toward the marina, while Lena angled left, glancing over her shoulder. Their jet skis collided head-on at an estimated 30 miles per hour. The impact shattered the steering column on Lena's craft and ejected both riders into the water. Witnesses on shore saw one ski spinning in circles while the other began to sink. Ryan surfaced first, shouting for Lena. He had a gash along his ribs and was treading beside a floating seat cushion. Lena was 50 feet away, struggling to stay afloat. The crash had likely fractured her leg, the water around her clouded red. Several people on the dock began calling emergency services, though the area was nearly half a mile from shore. Within 3 minutes, a dark shape appeared under the broken jet skis. A large tiger shark was drawn by the mix of fish oil, blood, and leaking fuel. One man from the marina, using binoculars, later described seeing the dorsal fin slice through the surface, slow and deliberate. Ryan tried to paddle toward Lena, pushing debris ahead of him. He managed to grab hold of her shoulder once before she was yanked under. The shark had struck from below, closing its jaws around her injured leg. She surfaced again briefly, twisting before the water frothed red. The shark circled once more, then lunged at the overturned jet ski. Ryan climbed onto the damaged craft, blood pouring from his side where the collision had reopened his wound. Witnesses heard him calling out and then losing balance as the ski tilted. The shark came back a third time, biting into the rear tow rope still attached to the drifting bait bucket and thrashing until it tore free. The force threw Ryan into the water again. Rescue boats from the Coast Guard arrived roughly 12 minutes after the first emergency call. They found fragments of both jet skis, an oil slick, and personal items floating. Lena's sandal, Ryan's waterproof pouch. The water was murky from fuel and blood. Visibility less than 3 feet. Divers spotted a large tiger shark circling below at about 20 yards distance before it disappeared into deeper water. They located Ryan's body first, near the channel entrance. His wounds were consistent with blunt trauma from the collision and a single bite to the torso, determined to be post-mortem based on lack of hemorrhaging. Lena's remains were recovered the next afternoon, half a mile offshore. Autopsy confirmed she had suffered massive blood loss from the initial leg wound before the attack, followed by extensive trauma consistent with predation. Her wetsuit was shredded below the thigh, and traces of fish tissue were found embedded in the neoprene. Recovery crews noted that her personal flotation vest was intact but unfastened. Ryan's cause of death was ruled as drowning secondary to injury. The lagoon was closed for 3 days for water quality testing and predator monitoring. Officials determined that the bait bucket was the primary attractant, compounded by the fuel leak from the damaged skis. The state authorities released a brief statement warning against transporting or discarding bait within recreational zones. The rental company received a temporary suspension pending safety review. 2 weeks later, Key High Lagoon had returned to normal activity. The buoy where the collision occurred was repainted and re-anchored, the scarring on its side still faintly visible. For a time, instructors at the marina used the incident in safety briefings for renters, an example of how 2 ordinary mistakes could align at the worst possible moment. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.